I'll hand over to the wonderful Fee.
Hello, thanks very much, Lisa. Hi, everyone. I don't know if any of you have seen what I do, so if you haven't, I do a fair number of festivals and ceilidh series up and around the country, working with lots of different bands. Like everyone, I started working locally, doing whatever came along. So I sort of learned from the ground up, really learned the hard bookings, the weddings and corporate socials where we are just a bit of entertainment at the end. And ultimately all bookings are pretty much the same. They just sort of vary, really, I suppose, in excitement and satisfaction, but they're all I think that they're all broadly structured the same. You need to know the same sorts of things. And one of the things that occurred to me a long time ago is that we can learn quite a lot from other genres to improve our planning and our performance and our interaction and our general confidence at being the center of attention in the room all the time. And the one of the best exponents of that is the stand-up comedian, because they very often do open mic nights. They walk on, and sometimes they have hostile audiences or audiences who go there specifically to heckle. So to be able to hang on to attention while you are performing observational comedy, as the genre is at the moment, is quite a thing to do, and I think that we can learn quite a lot from them. So what I've done is made some notes about things that I think are worth considering and worth checking out, rather than specific things that you must or must not do, because each booking is slightly different, each caller is slightly different, and each band is slightly different. But things I think that we need to consider is that calling is entertainment. We are entertainers, and people have the choice between coming to our gig or staying at home or going out with friends or going to the cinema or whatever, and we need to make sure that people have a good time when they come to us. And really, when you're working with a band, it needs to be sort of quite well planned and quite well executed, so that the things that do happen, you can deal with them because you've got the structure right. If you look at comedians, they will very often have an introduction and an exiting piece of information that is that is specific to the gig that they're doing, but broadly they are working from a script or from ideas, and I think that there's a lot to be learned there. Having introductions to dances, how you encourage people to come onto the floor by specifying a particular type of dance. This is good for pairs, this is good for triplets if you've come here on your own, this is a good way of meeting other people. So having phrases that you can speak while your mind is elsewhere, it's quite a good exercise to be able to say something and think of something else. I think a lot of very successful performers use big hand movements. The attention is on us on the stage. There's often not a lot of room. I tend to use big arm movements anyway, because it encourages people to look at me, for the focus on me, so that I'm in their periphery, so that when I've stopped talking, I can still I can still cue people to come in with because they're already looking at me, and I see individual stand-ups having an entire huge stage commanding a big audience because they're moving around. It's not necessarily germane to the material that they're using, but they are focusing people's attention on them by moving around. We can't move around on the stage very much, but it's a good way of making sure that you are in the forefront of people's minds. I haven't identified a long list of comedians that I think you should check out, because this is quite an unusual concept to go to a different genre in order to do English ceilidh dancing, English ceilidh calling. But what I do think is a good idea is if you search out some and look at how particularly open mic comedians deal with hecklers. Our genre isn't particularly heckle heavy. You do get occasional ones, and they're usually sort of fairly harmless, kind of a bit drunk, usually young or middle-aged men who, you know, that they are the funniest person they've ever come across. And how you deal with them, it does vary from person to person, situation to situation. Sheila Mannering, who taught me almost everything I ever needed to know, said, never ever respond to a heckler unless you want to spend all night communicating with them. So I tend not to. Some people do. Some people think it's great to have that kind of interaction going. One of the most important things is if you do get a heckle, and it's a genuine, let me just explain a difference between a heckle and somebody wanting information. If somebody doesn't understand, they'll bellow out, explain it again. You know where you are with that. If somebody thinks it's funny to heckle you, the worst thing you can do is to let that affect you and interrupt your flow. If you think of a performer who has somebody shout out, what you want to see is either somebody slapping them down or just ignoring them altogether, because you know perfectly well that nobody can hear what they actually said. You just hear somebody shouting something and then around them a few giggles. My advice is just to ignore them. Ignore them until you are confident that you can actually slap them down by saying something, you know, kind of nice, like, oh, first beer. People always love that. You know, it's a very gentle way. And that's something that I see a lot of performers dealing with, you know, your actual stag nights, or very often hen nights coming in. In terms of who you are on stage, we're not actors. We aren't being different people. But what you can do, if you're feeling that 100 people is very intimidating, you can find an aspect of your personality and your persona that you are content to exaggerate. I'm numbered with this accent. I can't pretend not to have it. So if I need to, I overplay it and I go the full plum, the full Joanna Lumley, and it works every time, particularly with the sort of the very drunk who absolutely love being told off by a posh woman. So that's kind of a thing that you can do. If you think of some comics whose humor you don't particularly like, think about who they actually are day to day. They're highly unlikely to be quite unpleasant or confrontational. They're probably quite good, nice people, but it's a very crowded field. So they find an aspect, perhaps their sarcasm, that they particularly want to emphasize their shtick. And exaggerate that. You don't have to do it the whole time, but it's a mechanism of dealing with lots of people. If you're doing a wedding or a corporate do where somebody is quite problematic, look, think about when you've seen a few open mic nights, and think about how the person on the stage actually deals with a potentially antagonistic person. They've always kind of clicked onto them. They've always worked out who they are in the first sort of minute or so of their chit chat. So if you're doing something like a corporate gig where people are drinking on the company's dollar and they're very, very drunk, and then somebody is going to try to come up and take the mic from you, you can't do a great deal about that because you are fixed on the stage, but you can make your body quite big. You can fill the space, and if you see that bloke who's been harassing you, that chap from accounts, and you think, God, I know he's going to try and come and do a speech while I'm talking, make your body big. And then if somebody comes towards you, particularly if you don't have a stage, if you've just got an area that's demarked by the foldback monitors, for example, just make sure that you sort of turn into that person. Imagine you are striding around a stage, so that you are deflecting their transmission towards you. So think about a solo performer, if that helps. And very often people will pick up on that sort of body language that is, it's not confrontational, but it's not welcoming. That's quite a useful thing to do. Don't ever try to force any humor. Don't try and make jokes or have lines if you're not a naturally witty person, or if you simply don't feel funny tonight. I'm never suggesting that you should try to be somebody that you aren't. What you can do is pick up moments that are entertaining in the dance that you've just done, and mention it. So, and people really like it when you say, that was a fantastic set, and I really liked that group of people over there who had such an elegant way of doing this particular movement. People love that. So have the confidence to point out really nice things about the people who are dancing. It makes the audience feel that we are all one, that we're not just up on stage delivering a night, we are enabling the night. You can also have tucked away a couple of 30-second anecdotes about dances that went hilariously wrong last week. People did this particular move. It was utterly wrong, but it fit the music, and so we wrote it down, and now we're going to present it as a new dance. Have just a couple of those things in the back of your mind if you need to break a bit of tension, or if you want to keep people's attention on you. Practice them. Just a few lines. Have them written down as bullet points. Practice them in the mirror so that you can speak them, so that you're making a friendly little note, so it's not just, oh, next dance, do this dance. So you are so you're presenting a bit of a performance, so that people feel that they're getting their money's worth with you, so to speak. What you can do is, if you hire or borrow the performance space in your local music shop, most music shops will have a quiet room or a sound room where you can have a mic and a foldback monitor, and very often they've got this great big mirror as well for the boys who want to practice their sort of bass guitar windmills. That's really what that's for. But hire or borrow it, and stand in front of the mirror, or stand in front of a mirror at full-length mirror, and get used to seeing yourself on stage, listening to yourself, listening to how you sound, listen to the words that you're using. Do you understand it? So that you don't feel when you go on stage and you hear your voice coming through the speakers, you don't feel, oh, who is that? Oh, is that really how I sound? Do I really sound that cockney, that high voice? Do I really sound that muffled? So you are viewing yourself as a performer, so you're quite objective about it. As I say, it's not really a genre that where you get much confrontation at all. It's far more likely that you'll get people coming up saying, I don't really know what to do. If you choose to go from where you are onto the floor to demonstrate, obviously you know perfectly well you never touch anybody without their permission. If you do need to put somebody in a particular place, you always say, may I guide you? And then you always make sure that you're using their upper body, that, you know, their shoulders or their upper arms. Even better, just try to usher somebody into position. And when you're there, don't get deflected by somebody else in the set wanting to distract your attention. You're there specifically to demonstrate something that could quite be demonstrated on the stage. So just remember, you are still in charge, and you're still, the focus is still very much on you, not on them. There are a number of places where you can watch a number of comedians. As I say, I didn't particularly want to give a list of people to watch, because by the time people are on the television or they've got their own podcast, they've learned all of the tricks of being good performers. One of the places where you tend to see quite a lot of new and established comedians are live at the Apollo. So if you do a YouTube search on that, most of those performances going back for years and years and years have been recorded. And while you're not, you know, busy, just look at half an hour's worth, see the different techniques that people are using to get and maintain the attention. One thing that I do is I split looking at the technical aspect of how somebody uses the microphone. So you've got a microphone here. So you've got a microphone, and if it's there, then people can hear you very well. If you want to make your voice louder, but you don't want to dominate everybody, if you just move your head away very slightly, then you can speak much more loudly. If you move it slightly further away, you can shout, you know, and whip people up towards the end. So so they hear the excitement, but they're not being shrieked or shouted at. So I look at the difference between the technical aspect of performers, and then on a different occasion, I'll go back to the same performer and I'll listen to their actual routine. And sometimes I might look at 2 or 3 performances from the same person, and I'll pick out the phrases that they are using again and again. And sometimes they're using almost like little islands in their performance as triggers or as segues into the next section. The other resource that I found is Dry Bar Comedy, and that's an American platform. Dry Bar Comedy is exactly what it sounds like. It's a series of comedy shows in America where there's no alcohol permitted, so people aren't hilariously drunk. They are new comedians, so there is a different type of humor than perhaps the sort of humor that you might have got, I don't know, 50 years ago with the comedians, with working men's comedians, working men's clubs. There's sort of what I would regard as older-fashioned comedians, where they're just coming out with one-liners and their mother-in-law jokes or that sort of thing. that's far more of an intimate performance. It's a much smaller setup, so you don't get the technical variation of people commanding the space, but you can still listen to performances and segues, because a lot of what we do is not just here's a dance, here's another, here's another, here's another. What we're trying to do is to build a show, build an evening where you start off doing something, and then you build on it, and then towards the end you're doing more familiar things, so at the very end of the evening, or the end of the gig itself, you feel as though you've actually achieved something. Oh, I know how to do some country dancing now. So it's providing a sort of an analogous mechanism to develop yourself as a performer, that I think is quite a useful resource. And I hope that if there's anything that I've said has been useful, then I think that's a good thing.